We are talking Voice of Shadows. This is directed by Nicholas Bain and is effectively a haunted house movie. Now it focuses on this couple who, the guy is I think from Colombia, the girl is American, and girl's aunt suddenly passes away and she is left quite a large house which is worth quite a lot of money. But there are some stipulations that she must abide to basically claim this property. And a couple of people are involved in the kind of the management of this house, you might say. There is this kind of executor of the will, there's a local priest, and they seem to take definite umbrage with this girl's boyfriend, who is a Catholic but who's had somewhat of a troubled past, and they kind of really are trying to encourage this girl to get rid of him. Along with this couple also is this other younger girl who is the sister of the boyfriend. And as the film goes on, we learn there is some supernatural element involved here that seems to be somewhat of an oppressive force and has plans for the people dwelling within this residence. Now what will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So this is very much a classic haunted house movie. Shadows moving across the screen, dark corners of the house, spooky atmosphere. You know what's in the kind of the dimly lit basement, for example. It's all very kind of gothic and moody. So if you like a good classic haunted house movie, you know what's kind of going on here. Somewhat of a mystery about what's actually kind of happened and still happening. Then there is a lot to enjoy here. The movie, I think, does a good job of setting this kind of dark, foreboding atmosphere. Somewhat of a slow-paced film, but certainly a rising of the stakes and the tension as the kind of the film goes on, and you sort of peel back the layers and you sort of understand that things are maybe not what they seem, and there is certainly dark forces at work here. I think the actors do a fair job in their kind of roles. Their performances are sort of solid. There's a definite sense of danger, for example, even when our Gabriel, who is the boyfriend, you know, he's a devout Catholic, so he turns to the church, and there's definitely, even within the church, there's people who maybe seem more combative towards him, and some who maybe seem a little bit more, you know, wanting to kind of listen and things. So you think there's, you know, how deep does this go? So there's a fairly kind of good mystery here. And although it has elements of a classic haunted house movie, I still think it manages to carve out its own sort of story and have an interesting kind of take on what's actually going on, which is a little bit different, but without kind of seeming completely unfamiliar. It's a relatively low budget movie, but I do think the production looks like it's kind of well handled. It doesn't appear rushed. I know some of these lower budget movies sometimes can feel a little like they've just kind of whipped through it. This one does feel like there's a certain amount of time and dedication that the filmmakers have put behind it. So, you know, I do think there's a reasonable production behind it, even though it's obviously a low budget movie. And there's one aspect where I think it does show, but I think at least in regards to shooting, I think it looks, you know, the cinematography looks like it's been thought about. They've made decisions here to make it the best it can look for the budget that it is. So what doesn't work? Let me just follow on from what I've just said. The one area where I feel maybe this movie's look kind of you notice the budget somewhat is some of the digital effects. They've used sort of CGI digital effects to have some of these kind of ghostly effects, but even things like fire on occasion, and it looks very obviously digital effects. That's the one area where I feel the budget doesn't quite overcome its low budget roots, and it kind of looks a little bit, it stands out just from time to time. I mean, it's not like, as I say, it's a slower paced film. It's not like this is a massive CGI fest, but when we do see it, it's noticeably CGI. So there's that. The real issue I have with the movie is probably more the script. for example, there's a couple of things just to point out, just to give you an example. So as I've mentioned, the movie focuses on the girlfriend and her boyfriend, is Gabriel, who's probably the main character. But there was also this third girl, who's Gabriel's sister. But it wasn't until like halfway through the movie till like kind of he had said, "Oh, my sister." I thought, okay, that's who she is. Like, I didn't know. The movie does not do a particularly good job of setting up the characters, because like, who is this girl? Why is she hanging around? And she seems like really kind of familiar with like the aunt, and I thought, this is like your boyfriend's sister. That's quite a stretch for your aunt. I just thought, I don't know, the relationships didn't seem particularly kind of like fleshed out. I didn't really feel like we got a good sense of the characters. Now, the acting is fair, but I don't think the actors are given a lot to do in regards to having fleshed out characters. I mean, we're told that they met in Colombia, the boyfriend and girlfriend met in Colombia, but they don't seem that old. And it's just kind of like, well, how long have they been together? Because it seems like they act kind of like they're almost married. But it seems that they're relatively young. Again, it's just not, I just didn't feel like it was particularly well established, if that makes sense. But that is a kind of like a B issue with the script. The main issue I have with it is that it's just some of the kind of the way that the movie is plotted and how characters are written in regards to their reactions to things and their kind of like the way people react to certain stimulus that happens in the movie. So this is one of these films where I think characters are written to be not like actual humans, if that makes sense. So this is like, if you can imagine, you put yourself in the situation that these people are in, you're thinking, I wouldn't do that. You know, that's not how any human I would know would act like this. It's kind of like how a script like wants this person to act because it needs the story to go in a certain direction. But it's like the characters, the way they react to things, the way they you know, react to certain stimulus that happens in the movie, or situations that will unfold, or information that is found out, and things like this. It really is a really not a realistic movie in regards to how a realistic depiction of people. It's very much just like, this is what we want, where the script wants the story to go, and the characters will have to write around that, and they'll just have to do it because that's just the way the story wants to go. You know, it's one of the kind of the bugbears I have with a lot of horror films, is that the characters often don't seem like real people, and that's kind of true of this movie. Now, I think because of some of the other characters that are also written, it's hard to really root for some of these characters sometimes, because they don't feel particularly kind of well realised, particularly like the girlfriend, who is like the main character. Their sister, who as I said, I didn't even realise who she was until about halfway through the movie. She's somewhat superfluous to it. And we were introduced to a couple of priests, and again, they're not particularly kind of like thinking, I'm not really feeling these characters. I'm not really like invested into them, and I don't blame the actors here. I think some people might critique the acting here, but I actually think the acting was fun. I actually think it was more of a script, and the way these characters are just kind of like somewhat poorly written. As it stands, it's a slower moving film, so some people might not be too enthralled here with the kind of the slow pace of the plot. And there's a couple of things that happen that just seem, let me give you an example. So we have a scene where one person stabs another person, without saying who, and the blade is literally about 1 inch. So 1 inch long, but it's a very small blade. So we see one person stab someone else, and then the next scene is them being like this other one person burying the other one. Thinking that's a really kind of like quite a big transition from going from one to the other. So it's a little bit poorly put together in some aspects. Overall, it's a spooky haunted house movie that creates a good atmosphere. Some fair visuals, albeit some of the VFX are a little wonky, but it's unfortunately the script lets it down for being a truly engaging story, partially down to, I think, some weak characterization. What did you think? Leave me a comment, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.